The UFC returns from its 1-week hiatus and returns to Paris, France this upcoming Saturday with a massive main event in the middleweight division at the top of the bill between Nassourdine Imavov, the Frenchman, and Caio Borralho from Brazil. This is a potential borderline #1 contender fight for Khamzat Chimaev's newly minted middleweight throne, but it might just depend on the way in which the victor comes out, and of course what will happen in just a few more weeks' time when Ranier de Ridder and Anthony Hernandez face off against one another, but we'll worry about that next month. The last time that Nassourdine Imavov has tasted defeat was in January of 2023, and that was to Sean Strickland, who 2 fights later would go on to become the middleweight champion of the world in September of that same year. Meaning that Nassourdine will enter this Paris main event on a 5-fight unbeaten streak, with his first fight after the Strickland loss being a no contest due to an accidental clash of heads against Chris Curtis, and since then, 4 consecutive victories against progressively better competition. The win streak would begin with Roman Delija, where he would earn a decision. Then he would finish former title challenger Jared Cannonier in the main event of UFC Louisville last year in the 4th round. Then follow that up with another victory, this time against Brendan Allen, who at that point was on a 7-fight win streak. And most recently, and none bigger for Imavov, is his victory over the former champion Israel Adesanya in February in the main event of UFC Saudi Arabia, where not only would he earn the win, but he would knock out Israel Adesanya in the opening seconds of round number 2, 30 seconds in to be exact. So with that win streak, with those names on his resume, with the 2 big finishes, he's done all there is to do, in my opinion, to be a #1 contender. But the problem for Nassourdine is that there are so many legitimate elite level title contenders right now at the 185-pound weight class, and his opponent Caio Borralho is another one of them. Caio, the leader of the Fighting Nerds camp, launched himself onto our television screens in September of 2021 with a decision win on the Contender Series, and then, rather than being awarded a contract that night, would be offered a second chance on the same season and would return on October 19th, less than 1 month later, and get another opportunity on DWCS. This time, he made good on it with a first-round knockout that would then allow him to get a contract to join the Ultimate Fighting Championship. So since making his official UFC debut on April 16th of 2022, Caio has gone 7-0, and the unbeaten stretch in the UFC includes wins over Armen Petrosyan, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, Obus Magomedov, Paul Craig, and most recently the former title challenger Jared Cannonier, where they would go back and forth for 25 minutes in their main event last August in one of the better fights of the year, and Borralho would come out on top with the decision. And now, over 1 year since his most recent fight, Caio is back in the octagon, currently with the number 7 ranking in this division next to his name, and his opponent Imavov sits with the number 2 ranking, and Caio could just be 1 win away from a title shot against Khamzat Chimaev should he beat Nassourdine here. And not only is Caio 7-0 in the UFC, but he only has 1 loss as a professional fighter in general over a stretch that spans 19 bouts, and that loss was in July of 2015, over 10 years ago. So we have a 5-fight unbeaten streak in Imavov versus a 17-fight unbeaten streak in Borralho, 22 combined fights without tasting defeat for these 2 elite level middleweights that are on the verge of title contention. And what makes it even better is that both of them are in their fighting primes right now. For Imavov, he sits at 30 and Caio is at 32. And both of them, while having their strengths as mixed martial artists, are also both so well-rounded and can get the job done in terms of getting a win anywhere that the fight goes. Nassourdine, of course, having Russian roots, does know how to handle the grappling and wrestling situations, but obviously see his knockout wins over Israel Adesanya and Jared Cannonier, that should show you just how elite he is in the striking realm as well, not to mention his elite work in the clinch. And for Caio, he was known for his grappling, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu skills early on in his UFC career, but he proved that he can also win the fight over the course of a decision and with the fight on the feet, as he would again go toe-to-toe with Jared Cannonier as previously mentioned. And Jared being one of the few people in the UFC's history that has knockout wins in 3 separate weight classes, mind you, and Caio was not afraid to go with him on the feet and get the better of him in the striking. Which leads me to the X's and O's of this fight and all of the question marks surrounding all of the possible outcomes that this one could behold. Because I could see both of these men winning via knockout, via submission, or via decision, and it could also be very convincing for one, or it could be a very close fight of the year contender, or somewhere in between where it's relatively lackluster. I don't necessarily view Imavov as wanting to grapple and wrestle with someone like Caio. I view it as him wanting to do clinch work and keep the fight at distance. And for Caio, I think it's going to be hard for him to get in close to Nassourdine and get him down to the ground. But even if he does prove successful on the feet in order to get the fight closer into his distance, push Nassourdine up against the fence, will he really be able to get Imavov down to the ground? And if so, can he keep him there? Can he utilize his jiu-jitsu skills to outdo the defensive grappling of Imavov? I honestly feel like this main event has everything that you can ask for a high-level mixed martial arts fight, and then you add in the big-time implications in this absolutely loaded, on-fire middleweight division right now. There is a lot of eyeballs and a lot of pressure on Nassourdine Imavov, not to mention he's in front of his home country in France and Caio, who is the leader of the Fighting Nerds and carries them on his back. And again, if the victor in this fight comes out with a very decisive decision that is utter dominance like Khamzat Chimaev displayed in his title-earning performance at UFC 319 against DDP, or one of these two men get a big-time finish, they could absolutely solidify themselves as the next #1 contender without having to see what happens in the RDR Anthony Fluffy Hernandez fight October 18th. But if it does come back to the middle ground that I talked about where it could be potentially relatively lackluster, you best believe the UFC is not jumping the gun to make one of these two men a #1 contender when they have another big fight just a little over 1 month away. So I want to get your thoughts on this UFC Paris main event down in the comments below, alongside with your predictions and your bets. And now let's head to the co-main event of the evening, where another fighting nerd will be putting his skills on display, and that is none other than Mauricio Ruffy, who has his opportunity to bounce into the lightweight top 15, but in order to do so, he will have to take out the ultra-dangerous Frenchman, Benoit Saint-Denis. 13th ranked lightweight in the world right now, Benoit Saint-Denis made his UFC debut on short notice in October of 2021 at UFC 267, up a weight class in the welterweight division, and would go the full 15 against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, the longtime veteran. And while he would put up a valiant effort in that debut fight, he would come out on the losing side of it, but would not allow that loss to deter him from finding success in the UFC, because after that, he would tally off 5 consecutive victories, with all 5 of them via finish, 3 in the second round and 2 in the first round. And it comes as no surprise that all 5 of them were by way of finish, because he has a 100% finish rate in his 14 professional victories. And some of those names to go with that 5-fight win streak were Ishmael Bonfim, Thiago Moises, and Matt Frivola. And Benoit Saint-Denis had so much momentum off of that 5-fight finish streak that heading into 2024 at UFC 299 in March of that year, he would be awarded by stepping up against Dustin the Diamond Poirier, former interim champion, former multi-time undisputed title challenger, and at that point I believe was ranked #2 in the world, and Benoit was number 12, so he was getting a 10-spot jump up in competition. And it looked as though Benoit was about to earn himself a crack at Islam Makhachev's lightweight throne at that point, because he dominated Dustin Poirier in the opening round of their fight. However, Dustin would bounce back in round 2 and earn a vicious knockout. And then Benoit was unable to bounce back from that one like he did in his first UFC loss, and instead he would lose a second consecutive bout, and this time it was in his home country of France, where last year Renato Moicano would absolutely dismantle Benoit up until getting the second round TKO stoppage at the end of that round. So all of a sudden it looked as though Benoit Saint-Denis had gotten too much of a jump too soon and was not going to be able to recover. However, it was against a short notice replacement and former UFC fighter getting his opportunity at a second stint, Kyle Prepolek. And Benoit would ultimately get another finish to add to his resume, this time a second round submission via arm triangle. And at 29 years old, Benoit is truly just now getting ready to enter that fighting prime that we see most fighters have, but he has proven to be an absolutely kill or be killed fighter, having only gone the distance one time in his 18-fight professional career that includes 2 knockout losses. And that may not bode well for Benoit, because Mauricio Ruffy is an absolute sniper in this lightweight division with his lethal striking skills. The fighting nerd is also 29 years old, much like Benoit Saint-Denis, and has a record of 12 wins with just 1 loss, with 11 of his 12 wins by way of knockout. And that includes 2 of his 3 UFC wins thus far, and the most recent was a contender for the knockout of the year in 2025, and that was a spinning back kick to Bobby King Green in the first round of their fight back in March at UFC 313. Mauricio's striking skills make me think of a primetime Conor McGregor, with the very wide stance, the very loose movement, light on his feet, low hanging hands that can come quickly and out of nowhere with precise and dangerous power. However, he's no stranger to being hit either, much like his counterpart in and BSD, which leads me to believe that we are in for a very violent affair in this co-main event that will more than likely not see the full 15 minutes and has a good chance to not even go outside the first 5. If Benoit can win, you could argue this would be the biggest win of his career. As a matter of fact, what argument would there be? It absolutely would be in terms of name value opponent, someone with so much momentum and with the Fighting Nerds camp behind him and Ruffy. This would be a massive opportunity for Benoit to put on for his home crowd and get a chance in his next bout, probably early 2026, to fight up in the rankings once more. And for Ruffy, this is his chance to catapult into the top 15 of the lightweight division in what would just be his 4th UFC fight, and from here, the rocket will be strapped to his back, just like every single other one of his Fighting Nerds companions, and in 2026, he could be in store for a massive year. So much like that main event, be sure to give me your thoughts and predictions on the co-main event as well, down in the comments below. And we've got another ranked fight on this UFC Paris card that is going to get slept on and is not going to get the respect it deserves, and it involves another UFC debutant, and that is 2022 PFL World Champion Ante Delija taking on the longtime UFC veteran and top 10 ranked heavyweight Marcin Tybura. The 39-year-old Tybura enters this one on a 2-fight win streak and having won 3 of his last 5 bouts overall. The 2-fight win streak includes a decision over Mick Parkin, training partner and teammate of current heavyweight champ Tom Aspinall, and a TKO victory over Saint-Denis. And his most recent loss came in August of last year, where he would be submitted by the Polar Bear Sergey Spivak in the opening round of their rematch. Tybura has been in the UFC since April of 2016 and has fought the who's who of this weight class for 9 years, including the likes of Andrei Arlovsky, Fabricio Verdum, Derek Lewis, Stefan Struve, Shamil Abdurrahimov, Augusto Sakai, Sergey Spivak twice, Ben Rothwell, Alexander Volkov, Tom Aspinall, Tai Tuivasa. So he has no shortage of experience, and while I'm not saying Ante Delija has been a can crusher, as so many people love to say about PFL champions, but his caliber of opponents does not stack up to Tybura's. But that doesn't mean that Delija has just beaten nobodies, because he has wins over Matthias Scheffel, former PFL champion Renan Ferreira, UFC veterans Maurice Green and Jorgen De Castro, and another PFL champion Denis Goltsov. And he has also been training with the likes of the heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall and Mick Parkin, former opponent of Marcin Tybura, and both of whom have faced Tybura. So you gotta think he's been getting some seriously good looks on what to expect out of Marcin heading into this fight, which could give him a big time upper hand in his UFC debut that could allow him to crash into the heavyweight top 10 should he get a victory. Alongside those big ranked matchups on this UFC Paris card, we've got Balaji Oki taking on Mason Jones in the featured bout, 2 men fighting out of Europe. Mason Jones hailing from Wales with a 16-2 record, and Oki hailing from Belgium and has a 10-2 record. We also have a fun fight in the light heavyweight division between Modestas Bukauskas and Paul Craig making his return to 205 pounds. A light heavyweight prospect that I'm still high on even after his first professional loss, Oumar Sy, fighting out of France, is also on this card and taking on the Brazilian Brinson Ribeiro. And the future Sam Patterson is back on this card in Europe, taking on Trey the Truth Waters, who has a 9-1 professional record. So be sure to let me know all of your thoughts, your predictions, and your bets for this UFC Paris card down in the comments below, especially in that big-time main event middleweight bout between Imavov and Caio Borralho. And how about this for the Fighting Nerds getting a chance to main and co-main event a card together and take out Frenchmen in front of their home crowd? That would absolutely continue to catapult them in to superstardom. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because we are on the road to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and the goal is to hopefully reach it before the end of 2025, so we've got 4 more months to go and just over 100 subs. Alongside with my breakdowns and previews heading into each weekend's card, I also recap the most meaningful results in the aftermath, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, TikTok, and like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you all in the next video.